Hello, welcome to the studio. Today I am starting a monoprint on tissue paper. I haven't done these for quite a long time. My trip to Skye actually really inspired me to go back to what I used to do, which is, like I say, very simple technique of monoprint, hand monoprint onto tissue paper, just building up layers and layers. So in this video I'm showing you how I start, how I plan, and the first few layers that go on to start one of these pieces. If you like what you see, please do click like, subscribe to the channel, and you can go along to ruthander.co.uk for lots more available artwork to buy and also self-paced video courses all about how to hand print. So the first thing I do when I'm planning a new piece is, well, literally to plan it, I suppose. I look at photographs, I look at sketches, so I have some sketches in this book that I did in the actual place that I want to do a picture of, but actually when I'm planning I do very simple compositional sketches with a biro. I mean, nothing fancy at all, and it's just to work out tones, basic composition, and what I do is I actually just do a list of, when you're printmaking you always work in layers, and generally speaking not that many layers, so you've only got a few goes at this. So I tend to write down the layers that I want to do and in what order. So I've got some idea of the colours I'm going to mix, which I'm going to do next, and vaguely what order I'm going to put them in. So for instance, here I've just put deep sky blue, a first layer of land, which will be a sort of darker colour, then some light over the land to create this nice depth and layering effect, and then I'm going to do another darker piece of the land, probably this bit here, and then I'm going to add the sun in and probably do this large cloud here. But I know that at this point, the actual picture itself will start to take over. I've done it that many times, and that's partly why I don't put too much effort into these drawings, because I know that I'm not going to try and make a piece that looks exactly like the photograph or exactly like the place I was in. I know that at some point the actual piece is going to take over, and I'm just going to enjoy making gestures and making marks and the accidental wonderful things that happen as I'm making. So that's why I'm really loose at this stage. I'm loose but not loose. I like to have just a sort of idea of how to start. So that's how I start, from photographs and just very quick composition sketches. Then I'm going to move on to mixing my colours. First thing I do when I am mixing colours is I actually look through all my colours that I've previously mixed, and I've just wrapped in foil, sometimes not very well, to see if I've got any colours that might work with this. So there's a few here. I know I'm going to be mixing a grey, I know I'm going to be mixing a kind of sky blue, so I've got a little bit of colours here already that I can start with, and then I will add on to that. I usually just use, I've got titanium white, a scarlet, red, Prussian blue, and a lemon yellow, and those tend to be the four that I almost always use to mix colours. So I'm going to go ahead and mix some colours now. So I've spent a little bit of time here just mixing a few colours. I've got a sky blue, I've got some greys. I just use spatulas made of bits of mat board that I can't really do anything with. I've just got a piece of plastic here, and I just pick up my colour and smooch it down again, pick it up and smooch it down again until it is mixed. And these are oil paints, not mixed with any medium or any extender, just oil paints. I find that when they're rolled out really thinly and they're put on tissue paper, they work really well, and the colours are really nice as well. So I've got a few different greys there, and in actual fact I might add, I think I'm going to add some yellow. Actually, I've got some yellow here in one of my little foil packets. So this is going to be a fairly limited palette for this piece, so I just want to get the colours really right, and I often spend quite a bit of time making sure the colours are right. So that's my colours sorted. So this is paper that I'm going to use. This is tissue paper. Now I must admit this is actually thinner and slightly more vulnerable paper than I'm used to. I normally get them on a big roll. They didn't have it in stock this time, so I've got these sheets of tissue. They are pH neutral, acid free, all of that stuff. They have a slightly shiny side and a slightly less shiny side, and I'm going to print on the less shiny side. So I hope this is going to withstand what I normally do to a piece. I'll have to be quite gentle with it, I think. And I'm going to start with this lovely sky blue. And just remember, I've got my notes here, I've got my little sketch here, but just remembering that you have to flip everything over horizontally in your mind when you're actually printing, because everything will flip horizontally when you print. So just to keep that in mind. It's not so bad when we're doing landscapes, especially if it's a landscape that isn't necessarily recognisable. But if it is recognisable and you need to have a very particular point in a certain place, you just need to remember that you need to flip everything horizontally. So this blue, I want it to come out on the right hand side of the picture, so I'm actually rolling it more on the left hand side. So I'm just using my fairly large roller here, and I'm not too worried about edges. I'm not too worried about how far it goes up or down. I'm sorry, this is a really squeaky roller. I'm just getting some colours down to start with, a few, and I know that these layers are going to be probably covered up quite considerably as the piece goes on. Oh, I've got a hair there. Don't want a hair in that because that will print. There we go. So I'm just kind of letting the ink just sort of drift out at the bottom here, and I'm sort of in my mind trying to figure out the size of the whole piece. And I'm going to put a bit more ink on. The first layer of ink is almost always a little light. It takes a little while to build up, so I'm going to put quite a large amount on for this first layer. So the bottom of this is probably going to be covered up anyway. I think I'm going to leave it at that. So all I'm going to do is take my piece of paper, lay it on, smooth it out as best I can. I do want this layer to be fairly smooth, so I don't want too many wrinkles in it. I'm just using my hand here to just spread it out, and I've got a few wrinkles. Let's try and get rid of those. Okay, and you can use a piece of scrap paper, or I actually have another piece of the tissue here just to protect the back of your paper. This tissue in particular is quite delicate, so that's why I'm putting some paper over the top as I take the first print, the first layer. I'm just using, this is my Baron, Speedball Baron, but you can use other things to burnish your print. You could use a spare roller, a rolling pin, just hands if your paper is thin enough. And just make sure that you're covering all of the surface. And something big like this, it's quite easy to miss. Okay, I'm just going to peel away. Okay, so we've got quite a sort of varied, uneven print there. I don't mind that too much. It gives a bit of background noise, a bit of interest to the piece, and that's going to go over there. I'm not going to let that dry. I am going to put on, I'm going to do another layer of the same colour just to make it really deep. So I've just put a bit more of the paint, the blue paint, on this side, because that's where I want the deepest colour to be. And I am going to have another go at that. So just putting the piece on again, and you often have to do this actually with especially with the first layer. Like I say, it's usually the faintest, the lightest, and you're working on dry paper, which just doesn't pick up the ink or paint quite as well. Okay, so scrap paper over the top, and same again. And here we go, pulling a wig in, and it really does make a big difference putting that second layer on. It's a much deeper colour. It's difficult to show you there, but it is much deeper and more saturated colour. So I am also going to add, I'm going to add a little bit of a sort of just a very light off-white here, just to the end and I suppose the bottom really. Just a very light layer. I'm just going to clean my roller a little bit, so just to make sure the oil that I use to clean up and the paint is off the ends of the roller. Really good idea, especially with a light colour, because it shows up. So I'm just going to do a sort of what I call a drift of colour, I suppose, just to get a feeling of light in the background. I'm going to do some up here as well. Sorry about my squeaky roller. And you can see you get a really lovely transparent effect. And just bear in mind that you will, when you're using lighter colours in particular, you can use that effect to, well, it just looks really great, basically. Okay. Now, there's not that much paint on there, so it may not show up much. I will see, and if need be, I'll do another layer. Just going to make sure I've got all my paint out the way that I don't want on it. Okay. So I'm hoping this just should sort of merge nicely into the blue and soften some edges. Now this is wet paint still, I haven't let it dry, so it will merge, the colours will merge a bit. So when I let the first layers dry, after that point it will be ink or paint just sitting on top, and it won't merge as much. So it's quite nice to get a few layers done while it's still wet, get these lovely soft drifts of colour, and then after that you can do more definite colours and forms on the dry paint. So I don't know if you can see that, but it's very subtle, but it is there. Got this very thin transparent layer on the edges. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to do in this session is just add some land. I'm doing the land in kind of lots of layers, so I'm going to do a very light sort of distant land, and then I'm going to build it up to be darker, sort of coming into the foreground. So what I'm actually doing is I've just put out a sort of long thin stretch of paint of the colour I want, and this is going to be pretty subtle because this is the furthest away layer of land, so to speak, and I'm just rolling it out so it's fairly even. And then I'm going to use a kitchen towel, but you could use rag or anything like that really, to create the shape of the land. And I'm just going to do this by eye. Okay, so just taking off what I don't want. This doesn't have to be perfect. So what I tend to do is I tend to on a piece of paper and I just fold it along the line of where I want my land to be. And just bearing in mind again, of course, this is back to front, so I'm just kind of letting the ink just kind of drift down. I'm not really taking any of that off. Got a few wrinkles there, see how that's done. Okay, very, very subtle. If you can see that. I'm going to do one more layer of land, a little bit darker grey, not much, so that will hopefully look as if it's a bit more in the foreground. And kitchen towel here, and again I'm just going to do it by eye. Okay, let's try that. Now I have to be quite careful about where I'm placing this. So I want the layer I've just put on to show through for a start, so I'm folding it kind of so that that does show through, and I also want it to kind of curve downwards across the paper. Right, there we go. So these will hopefully sort of be quite soft, they'll merge with the layers I've already put on, and I'm not, you can see I'm not even using a burnisher here, I'm just using hand pressure. Ah, there we go. So you can see there what's happened. It's almost like an outline, and that's just where the paint's built up where I took it off with the rag. But again, I like that, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. And so this is what I've ended up with just after this first session. Doesn't look much right now. There's going to be lots more put onto it, but I'm going to let that dry now as it is. And that's my background layers, my first layers for a tissue monoprint.